All right, Steve Denys here, Director of Business Management with Maizex, and I'm with Greg Stewart, our lead agronomist with Maizex, and we're here for a Maizex moving segment. And Greg, we're getting pretty close to spring now. Spring planting will happen depending on when you watch the video. Either it's already started or you're still a few weeks away. But some last minute pointers we may want to touch on in terms of as we go into spring, as everybody gets their plans in place. And Greg, why don't we talk about, because as the weather gets nicer, we get a lot of questions about how early can I plant, and should I be looking at soil temperature? Should I be looking at fitness? Where do you think?
Yeah, so I think when we're in April and looking forward, we still have to remind growers that fitness is our highest concern, right? There's just no point in pushing a field on April 25th that isn't fit. Yep. Right, and we've seen that over the years, the pains we've suffered from trying to push a field that wasn't fit, and so I think that has to be our dominant play is fitness, so that you can eliminate sidewall compaction, you can eliminate slots that crack open again, and you can get that plant off to the best start possible.
Well, and I know situations, I know myself, there's some years, especially, rental farms that may not be tiled, as an example, and we might be the 1st of June before the ground is actually really fit, but it seems to always pay to wait and be patient.
Yeah. And it probably is the most challenging thing for any grower to do, is to give it another day, especially if the forecast doesn't look like there's another day in it, right? And it also leads us to talk about, the fitness perspective in terms of temperature, right? So over the years, we've sort of moved away from the fact that, you've got to wait till the soil temperature is 50 degrees and what time of day do you measure it to see whether it's at 50 degrees. We've sort of moved away from a temperature paradigm towards a fitness. If the soil is fit and it's past the 25th of April, I'm planting regardless of soil temperature. And I think that is still the right philosophy, with, I guess, one exception, and that is that imbibitional chilling that might occur if you planted right into a cold front. So let's say you see the forecast Saturday morning, you're going to have temperatures of 0 degrees and light snow or freezing rain or something. Yeah, you may have had a good run of planting Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but the odds of having the sort of results you want if you continue to plant Thursday and Friday when the cold front hits Saturday morning, and that first water that the plant takes up is that Saturday morning water where temperatures have dropped and you've got snow on the ground. We need to back away from that from the temperature perspective.
So what you're saying, 24, 48 hours, 48 hours probably hold back?
Yeah, 24 for sure. And again, if you're in April planting conditions, then I probably give it 48, right? Because there's no sense in pushing it.
Yeah, very good. So wait till the ground is fit.
Yeah.
And watch that weather forecast.
Watch that cold front.
Yeah, I know last year I planted a couple days right before, and I was only supposed to get half an inch. This we can't predict.
Yes.
I got 5.5 instead.
Yeah.
So
water on the cold side.
And water on the cold side. So
Right on.
All right. So from there, let's talk about seed right. So we get a lot of questions now because our monitors especially newer monitors, are doing an excellent job in terms of measuring singulation and what our seed drop is and all the rest. Very accurate. And so at Maizex, we actually have been investing the last few years in a system called Seed Right. And Seed Right is where we're basically taking all the different seed sizes from particularly all of our leading sales products and products that are going to be big in our product lineup as we go forward. And we're actually running it through different meters. And so, Greg, what's been your experience with that?
Yeah, so I guess item number one is when we produce a document like this, which has all of our key hybrids, the different seed sizes, and gives you recommendations in terms of vacuum or finger setups. Make sure you've talked to your Maizex dealer and have looked at that information so that you can get your planter tuned up as carefully as possible for the seed lot that you're running. So that's sort of, I guess, point number one. The other point would be this whole idea of spacing and the critical nature of spacing. And we've had all sorts of arguments over the years about that. But in my world, being a little on the high side when it comes to vacuum settings, which might generate a few more doubles, is still a safer place to be than a vacuum setting that slips and gives you skips. Because the data is pretty conclusive that doubles will out-yield a skip. If you have two seeds there, it may not be ideal, but you're going to get a better yield than if you don't drop a seed at all, right?
Yeah, and I would say I would concur with that. The system I'm using, I've got a PTO-driven hydraulic pump to get
Right.
enough pressure,
Right.
and I cannot go below 20 pounds.
Okay.
And so it doesn't matter the seed size,
Yeah.
and it doesn't matter what our tests show. I mean, I'm basically running.
You're locked in.
I'm locked in at 20 pounds, and even with the smallest seed, I've never had an issue in terms of singulation, especially with the 2020 monitor, because
Right.
I'm measuring 99, 99 and a half, 99.6. You know, the previous monitor I had, there was no such thing as a percentage, right? You just sort of look at the number as it goes.
Right.
But I would concur with you. I think that it's better to have the pressure higher than lower.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
Right on.
All right, third thing we want to talk about is a lot of discussion this winter in terms of the need for uniformity. Uniformity in the canopy growth and canopy right through the season, the harvest, you know, to tackle such issues as western bean cutworm and you know, wherever we might get a gibberella infection, that kind of a thing.
Right.
So that's when we think about uniformity, we've spent a lot of time talking about planters and what can we do on the planter. But Greg, what can we do? Because really, uniformity starts with our tillage pass for
Yeah.
those that are doing tillage passes. So what's your thoughts there?
Yeah, absolutely. The sort of the challenge of spending, you know, big money on every possible addition to your planter to improve uniformity, and then not to spend an equal amount of time concerned about that last pass of tillage before your planter hits the field. You know, we've got to get our heads around that. So on the cultivator side, on that final pass of secondary tillage, you know, I like to think about the terms level
Yeah.
and light and uniform. So level, pretty straightforward. We got to make sure that those cultivators are leveled up, that the inflation pressure in the cultivator tires is all the same, that you've got you know, the cultivator adjusted properly so that it's level from corner to corner, from front to back. Light, I use the term light, well, not necessarily talking about the inflation pressure in the cultivator because there's not much you can do there, but the inflation pressure in your tractor that's pulling that cultivator. No sense in having 25 pounds per square inch of pressure in that tractor pulling the cultivator if, you know, you could get away with 8 or 10 or 12, right?
Yeah.
So and then uniform. You know, we've, again, like you said, Steve, we've talked all winter about how uniformity drives yield. Yeah, you've got to have a seed bed that's as uniform as possible before the planter hits it, or you're just maybe asking too much of your planter if your secondary tillage hasn't been uniform.
So I think some things to think about there would maybe, you know, when's the last time you really looked at your cultivator, or if it's a you know, modified disc, what do you call it? Vertical
Yeah,
till.
vertical till, yeah.
And so I think looking at your cultivator teeth, right? When's the last time you changed those come into play?
Yep.
You know, I noticed on our cultivator this year, we're actually replacing all the tines at the back, you
Yeah.
know, to try and get
Harrows.
uniformity there because it's worn all over the, you know, start to
Yeah,
get wear all over the
Yeah.
map. So I think those are all elements. What about depth? Like, what's your theory on depth when we start talking about that?
Yeah, so I think that for the most part, you'd like to cultivate as shallow as possible. There's different schools of thought. I'm not one that thinks that you never want to run the cultivator deeper than your seed depth. I think there's some conditions where you just don't have enough uniformity coming out of the winter that you can run, you know, a cultivator, you know, that shallow and actually do the job you need to do. But I think we sort of have to have the mindset that deeper is not always better. You've got to make it uniform. You've got to level it out, but you don't want to be running 4 inches deep when 2.5 will do the job.
Yeah, yeah. Very good. So 3 areas talked about today. So we talked about temperature versus fitness,
Right.
Seed right recommendations, and so they can talk to their Maizex dealer or certainly contact us to get our recommendations from that perspective with the various planters, and then starts with tillage in terms of uniformity for those doing secondary tillage. All right, Greg, thanks very much.
Thanks, Steve.
Let's have a good spring.
All right.